Thank you for joining us. I'm Anumeet from the Embassy. I'm the Social Secretary to the Ambassador. We're glad you can join us today for a book talk by Ms. Kenize Mourad, who will introduce her new book, In the City of Gold and Silver. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you the best-selling author, journalist, and historian, Ms. Kenize Mourad. Born of a Turkish princess and an Indian Raja, Ms. Mourad was hidden from her Muslim father to be raised first by Catholic nuns and then foster parents in France. Tapping into her assorted lineage, her work reflects her passion to create awareness of different cultures and create a world of tolerance. Having been raised and educated in Paris, Ms. Mourad writes in her first language, French. For each of her books, she has traveled far and wide and spent hours interviewing people and listening to translated sources. Her books, hence, are a result of meticulous research, great writing, and delightful renderings. In her efforts to bridge cultures and nations, she has worked as a war correspondent and journalist for nearly 15 years with leading publications around the world. Her best-selling novel, Regards from the Dead Princess, has sold over 5 million copies worldwide and has been translated into 34 languages. In 2013, the French government, in recognition of her great talent, honored her with the title of Officers of Art and Letters. Tonight, she will be discussing her new book, In the City of Gold and Silver. The book brings to life the historical character of Begum Hazrat Mahal, the queen who led the revolt against the British in 1857. In the City of Gold and Silver is a narrative of love, betrayal, and honor. The book, even though a historical fiction, stays true to the times it depicts and is wonderful insight into the syncretic culture of 19th century Awadh. This book has already been translated into 12 languages and sold more than 500,000 copies. So please join me in welcoming the very inspiring Ms. Kenize Mourad.
Thank you for having come, so many. So it's very cold. So this book, I don't know if you heard before about Hazrat Mahal, because when last year I was in India, the book was translated. In fact, it has been translated by an Indian lady. And I made a long, big tour all over India, north, south, east, west, in 12 towns. And apart from Lucknow, nobody had heard of Hazrat Mahal. And everybody was absolutely fascinated and interested to know about this great heroine of independence. And of course, in Lucknow, everybody knows about her. She's a child from Lucknow. And I heard about her the first time when I was in Lucknow. It was in the 60s, the first time I came there. The young lady said she said, in fact, I was raised by Catholic nuns, and when my father asked for me when I was 5 years old, just after the war, the nuns hid me because they did not want me to go to an awful man. Of course, awful, he was a Muslim father. So obviously he had to be awful. So I was brought up in France, like a French girl. And I suppose this has led me to try to fight prejudices, religious, social, ethnic prejudices, because I myself had been, let us say, the product. I would not say the victim, because who knows what was better. This is not the point, but at least I was the result of prejudice, of religious prejudice. I should have been brought up in India, in an Indian family, and become an Indian begum. And maybe, but I think my life now has been maybe more interesting. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that prejudice is the worst thing, of course, which I try, as much in my career as a journalist, as a writer, I've been writing about that and trying to fight that. And I've been a journalist for more than 15 years in a very important French weekly called Le Nouvel Observateur, the New Observer, and I was covering Middle East and Indian subcontinent. I cover the Iranian wars, the wars in the wars in Lebanon, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, also the Indo-Pakistan wars. And I would never have wanted to cover Europe. I was not interested. I wanted to try to explain to my adopted country, France, and Europe, let us say, to try to let them know better the Indian subcontinent or the people from the Middle East, because of course, in Europe or in the West, many preconceived ideas. And I think it's very important to try to make things a little more accessible. And because, as we all know, the wars and the conflict are really built on prejudices. I mean, you are not going to make war to another people if you are not convinced that they are bad and dangerous. Otherwise, why would you go? You have to be convinced. So that's how the media are so important, and how it's I'm sometimes desperate to see that the media are not really doing their work, and they just try to raise the tension between different people. So now let's talk about the book. The book is an historical novel. All facts and protagonists have been minutely checked. And there's even a few quotations of what English said, and also of what Indians said. And most of the time you get it by a footnote. And of course, it's not a biography, because a biography would be, I've always written about history, but giving life through fiction, to give life to history. There's a very great historian, I don't remember his name, he said that in history, erudite imagination is necessary to reconstruct events and give life and reality to an otherwise dry enumeration of dates and facts. So the book is situated between the period of 1856 and 1859. It is what the English call the Sepoy Mutiny, and that in India, of course, we call the First War for Independence. Obviously, it was not at all a mutiny, which means that just soldiers revolted. It was the whole of the North India revolted, and nearly threw the British out. If there had not been for the different things, the importance, the difference in armaments, the Indian rifles were not very good, and they were shooting, for instance, 200 meters when the British were 800 meters. For the guns, it was about the same difference. It's not only that, there is also Indians were very, very, very courageous, but had no discipline. And so they were going in front of the guns, and they wanted to, and they were killed for nothing. When the British, of course, were much more organized. And also Indians have not such a good strategy, because in the British army of the Sepoy, the Indians were never allowed to go higher than a certain grade. So they never could have a global view of the battle, of the strategy. So, and also, third thing, quite a few rulers, Rajas, Nawab, etc., at the beginning did side the rebellion, but soon, when they felt that maybe the British may win, they betrayed and sided the British. And for instance, if the big states of Bhopal and Hyderabad had been with the rebels, with the revolt, the story would have been changed. Maybe the British would have left in 1858. But the beginning of Bhopal were very wise and very political women, and they felt, no, we better play safe because the British. And in Hyderabad, the old Nizam had died. It was his son, young, and the son had not much experience and was under the influence of the Prime Minister, who was very pro-British. So these two big states in the center of India stayed with the British. And that was... I want to read... Can I have just 1 minute? Something? I want to read something that, because then again, the Begum, there is very little written about the Begum. I went to all the libraries in Great Britain. There was nothing about her. There are, as you know, 30, 50,000 books about the mutiny, always from an English point of view. And this book, of course, is from the Indian point of view. And nothing about the Begum. I found one thing in the Times of London of 1858, which is really interesting. It says, the Begum of Awad shows greater strategic sense and courage than all our generals put together. It's quite commendable. And so, as you know, Awad was this very, very rich state, the richest state of North India at that time. And in fact, the British had in 1 century annexed 2/3 of the states, 2/3 of India, and corresponding to 3/4 of the population. And they are looking at Awad, which was the pearl of the pearl, and they were trying to find all sorts of reasons or, excuses to annex. They could not find. Finally, they did annex without any real excuse, and the people revolted. And they exiled the king, Wajid Ali Shah, in Calcutta, where he was given there a palace and courtesan and to try to. But in Lucknow, the people who loved their king revolted. And Hazrat Mahal, so let's talk about her first. Hazrat Mahal had been an orphan, very young, and she had been brought up to become a courtesan. As the famous courtesans of Lucknow that you heard about, I suppose, these courtesans were queens, absolute queens. They were holding court. They had a patron, a benefactor, a protector, but otherwise they had their salon, and they were receiving every evening aristocrats and men from the very good society, and they were discussing poetry, there was music. They were brought up in a very severe way. They were brought up and they had to learn a music instrument. They had to learn to poetry or singing and good manners. And they had such refined manners that the good families of Lucknow, princely or aristocratic good families, were sending their son very often to learn the etiquette at the house of these courtesans. So and of course, English could not understand. They thought for them there was no difference between courtesans and prostitutes. So sometimes they were going to these places and it was a big scandal and they were hated by the people because courtesans, again, were not at all this kind of thing. And so Hazrat Mahal never really became a courtesan because the crown prince, Wajid Ali Shah, noticed her, and she became one of his fairies, what's called one of the fairies, where the dancing, he was putting up, plays and dancing, etc. He was an artist, he loved dance and music and poetry. He was a great poet. We have his poems. And she also was a rather good poetess, one says, but one doesn't have her poems. And so he chose her. He was quite impressed by her talent in poetry. And when she bore a son, he married her, and she was the fourth wife. And she became, at that time, her first name was Muhammadi. She was a Muslim. And she became Hazrat Mahal, Begum Hazrat Mahal. And when then the king was exiled, and the people revolted, as I said, the chief of the army came to her, of the Indian, came to her and said, came to the wives of the king and said, we need to have one of the young sons to be a symbol and to be crowned king. And none of the wives wanted but her. She was the youngest, she was 26, And she said, I'm ready, and my son is ready. So the son was 11 years old. He was crowned nearly in clandestine way, and she became the regent. And she proved to be a fantastic, wise, courageous, and believable woman. She was a stateswoman. She promulgated laws which keeping, the well-being of the people, of the society. She had been poor, so she was taking care of the poor. And she also led battles on horseback and on elephant. And so we have traces of that, and I will tell you how I got this. So, but anyway, after she fought, she kept the British at bay for 2 years. 9 months, she prevented the British entering Lucknow. It was the famous siege of Lucknow, where part of the British were in the Residency, surrounded by the Indians, as they could not move, and the British army were sent from outside to free them. They could not for 9 months. And after that, the army was so important, and I say also the weapons were more important. So they took Lucknow. And the Begum left Lucknow with her army, and she began a fight of guerrilla warfare, hit and run for 1 year. And she was offered to surrender. She never ever answered even. She was offered all sorts of money, honors, etc., and she just did not even answer. She, with her army, were pushed towards Nepal, in the Terai, in the marikaj, swamps you say, and where many died of fever. And she finally took refuge, but she was a virtual prisoner in Nepal, where the Maharaja was a friend of the British. The British did not want to kill Hazrat Mahal. She would have become a martyr. She would have been more dangerous still. So they allowed her to stay in Nepal. She stayed in Nepal. She could not, as I said, she was a virtual prisoner, with her son, Birjis Kadar, and there she died. But she saw the beginning, the seeds of the rebellion flower and flourish. And a few years after, it was the first rebellions in Bengal, then in other parts, and then Gandhi, of course, and the great movement for liberation. And exactly 90 years after Begum Hazrat Mahal began her fight, it was freedom of India, independence, in 1947. So I want to tell you how I wrote this book, because, as I said, there were very, very few documents. I knew about the book, I knew about Begum Hazrat Mahal, when I was in India, in the house of my father in Lucknow. There was an old gentleman, very, very distinguished, rather poor, who was coming to see my father. And he was the great-grandson of the Begum. It seems very, very far. It was just 4 generations. And he was talking about his great-grandmother, giving all sorts of details, and I was absolutely fascinated. And, but I didn't think of writing at that time. Then years after, very, very long after, meaning about 4 years ago, not even, I thought of writing this story for different reasons, because it has a lot of echoes which was happening today, and we'll talk of that after. So I went back to Lucknow. Again, I went to all the library in Great Britain, nothing. Even in Delhi, very little about her. And in Lucknow, of course, I found booklets in the Lucknow library, but not too much. And I went to the old families whose ancestors had been fighting along with the Begum. And so it was through oral tradition, but also all manuscripts in Urdu or Persian that they translated to me. One of these old families was the Mahmudabad family, I don't know if you heard of, and they are very prominent in my book. The Rajas in Lucknow, very old family. And so I got a lot from them. I also got, of course, from many books. I read, about the war, etc. I got a lot. There is everything about the war, but about herself, there is a very interesting. The government of UP has published 6 volumes of the telegrams exchanged between the British, the military, and the civilian during these 2-3 years of mutiny. And you have, day by day, hour by hour, what's happening. And there is a lot of references about the Begum, when she was fighting here, what she was doing, how the son was crowned. There was this description of the crowning ceremony, etc. So I got quite a few things. It was very difficult because it was all in total disorder, but I could find a lot. Obviously, the Begum is not the only leader of the Indian, of this war, the Sipai war. And I'm talking a lot of Nana Sahib, Tantia Topi, Ahmadullah Shah, Feroz Shah, and of course Rani of Jhansi, who is so well known in India and all over. And so I talk about them a lot, but Lucknow was the center. It began in Meerut, but Lucknow was the center of rebellion, and because Delhi did not stand very, very long, for a few months only. And when Delhi fell, everybody, all the military, all the troops came to Lucknow to join the Begum. So as she was a chief in Lucknow, and Lucknow was the very center, I consider she was really one of the most important leaders of the rebellion. So I would like to, so I began to tell you before why I chose to write this story, to fight this racial and religious prejudice. And also, in this book, I challenge many preconceived ideas. I'm still at heart, or partly, a journalist. So very interested in what's happening today and all what's happening in Middle East, India, and the Muslim world, of course. And so in this book, I challenge a lot of ideas about the status of the Muslim woman, which is not what one usually thinks. The so-called eternal antagonism between religious communities, the dangerous assimilation between the Muslim majority and the criminals who pretend to follow Islam while distorting it totally, and also the so-called moral duty of the Western powers to intervene into other countries to bring democracy. I don't think one can bring democracy with bombs anyway. And there are different sorts of democracy. It doesn't have to be totally the Western democracy. So I wanted my friend to read. You stay, but I first wanted to. No, you stay. First to read just one sentence of William Dalrymple, that you know certainly has written so much about India in such beautiful books. And he says, the lesson of 1857 insurrection are very clear. No one likes another people conquering their territory, depriving them of their land, or forcing them to adopt better ideas under the threat of arms. In 1857, the British discovered what the United States are learning now. Nothing radicalizes a people so greatly or undermines moderate Islam to such an extent as an aggressive intrusion. We see what's happening in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya. We are in a very bad situation. And, so when I was telling when the state of Awadh was annexed, all over India, people were absolutely outraged. And I found a very interesting quotation from a paper, The Hindu Patriot, which is a paper published in Akola in the state of Maharashtra. So that was written in 1857. The Hindu Patriot. Oh, sorry.
The annexation of Awadh scandalizes public opinion throughout India. The Hindu Patriot writes, "What is true of the common thief who steals an apple is also true of the hero who annexes a state. If in the first case the offense against morality condemns the culprit, then how can the usurper be condemned even more vehemently? Awadh is ill-governed, we are told, so let us annex Awadh. Hyderabad is oppressed, then let us depose its sovereign. But if one follows this reasoning, no kingdom in the world will be safe any longer from its neighbor's aggression. Inasmuch as accusations of bad government will fly the moment a powerful, unprincipled state wants to seize a weaker state, unlucky enough to possess riches the former covets.
So we are absolutely today. Thank you. So I also wanted to insist on the fact that at the time in India, or at least in Awadh, the religious communities were living so peacefully. And when I was also in Lucknow, it was the same, but it was, the Hindus were going to the religious ceremonies of the Muslims. Muslims were going to religious ceremonies of the Hindus. There were sometimes, no, not often, but it happened to be marriages. I give even the example of my family. The Raja of Kotwara, 2 centuries ago, I think, was a Hindu Raja. His best friend was a Muslim emir whose family had come centuries before from Yemen. And, no, I think it's okay. Okay, thank you. And he was the best friend, and the Raja had only a daughter. So he decided to give his daughter to his Muslim friend. And it's how the state of Kotwara, the reigning family, was Muslim. The state was half Hindu, the population, half Hindu, half Muslim, but it's how the Muslim family became the rulers of Kotwara. So you see, even it was possible, and it's not my only example, there are quite a few examples like that. And today, at the time of Wajid Ali Shah, the king was a very extraordinary person, very artistic, a little decadent, yes. Not so much as it is shown in the film of Satyajit Ray, but a little decadent. And it was a society which was a little decadent, it's true. But beautiful, with all the beauty of decadence. So, and he was acting Krishna. He was himself, every year, he was giving a play for the people, where all the people of Lucknow were coming. And he was dancing, he was a very good dancer of Kathak. He was covering his body with powder, crushed turquoise and pearls. So he was becoming the blue god, Krishna, and he was dancing Krishna. And people loved him, and they were calling him our Krishna. And he was a Shia Muslim originally. So I would like this. Okay, so that's now you have quite where? Till here. Yeah. Take your time.
The confrontation between religious communities that sometimes troubles other states are in fact unheard of in Lucknow, where the sovereigns have never discriminated between their subjects. Shia Muslims themselves, they have always had a policy of employing Sunni Muslims and Hindus who make up the majority of the population, often appointing them to the most eminent positions. They also enjoy bringing scholars of different beliefs together to discuss religious issues, following the example set by the great Indian ruler, the Mughal Emperor Akbar. During the 16th century, the emperor used to invite representatives of different schools of thought to his capital in Delhi to hold a discussion in his presence, with a view to founding a universal religion intended to unite all men. It was Deen-e-Ilahi, a syncretic ideology that borrowed from Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, and Hinduism. This is at a time when the Inquisition was raging in Spain, Portugal, and Italy, and when the wars of religion were spreading bloodshed in France. Wajid Ali Shah perpetuates this tradition of tolerance, but his aesthetic tastes incite him to dedicate himself in particular to the domain of the arts. All ills come from ignorance, he often says. It is through knowledge of one another's culture that communities learn to appreciate and respect each other. Under his impetus, Lucknow, the center of the gold and silver civilization, the Ganga-Yamuna civilization, named after the two sacred rivers that flow through the state, has reached the pinnacle of refinement. The marriage between the Ganga and the Yamuna symbolizes the fusion of Hindu and Muslim traditions.
Yes, Lucknow was, as you know, the center for the most beautiful, this encounter between two cultures gave rise to fantastic, beautiful architecture, miniature painting, beautiful music, the most beautiful poetry, and a lot of the good manners. When I'm in India today, still today, if I say I'm coming from Lucknow, people tell me, oh, you must be so polite. It's very interesting. So I also wanted to talk about, wanted to talk about the status of the Muslim woman, and I show in this book through the example of the Begum that the Muslim women were not submitted poor little creature, and we have the example of so many queens in India, Muslim queens, Razia Sultan, or the 4 rulers of Bhopal, 4 ladies. And for all these people, Razia Sultan and the 4 rulers of Bhopal, it is because the father thought that the son was not good enough and that the daughter was better. So they ruled these states. And of course, we know Nur Jahan, who was really the ruler while her husband was writing poetry and drinking. And of course, it has been totally distorted along the centuries. But at the beginning, one has to know that the 7th century, Quran gave to the woman rights that no other Jewish or Christian woman had. For instance, she could inherit and divorce, when the Western woman got this right only on the 19th century. She could be a witness, even a judge, when in France, a woman could testify in front of the courts only in 1938. She could be independent financially by the dowry she was given, and she was supposed to manage her wealth by herself. And even open a bank account, when the French woman could open a bank account only in 1965. One has to remember that the first wife of Mohammed, Khadija, was a very good businesswoman. She owned caravans. We are going all over the desert, transporting goods, and she was very rich. And his last wife, Aisha, was sitting with Mohammed, the prophet, who is companion of the prophet, and they were talking all sorts of things, politics, etc. A niece of Mohammed also was telling, God has not given me the beauty to hide it. Because the veil is again another invention. Obviously, never the face was to be covered, never. The woman had to be modest. There are 2 verses in the Quran which are talking about that. Only 2 verses about the veil. The woman has to be modest. She has to cover her shapes. And modesty depends on the time. Our great-grandmother were hiding their ankle, yes. And so there are these 2 verses, and it shows that it's not clear if she has to have a gauze or a veil on the hair, but in any way, the face is a barbaric custom which comes from other countries. And so about the prejudice, it's not only the I don't know if we have the time to still read a part. Mr. Yes? Anyway. So, yes. So, there is a very amusing part. I mean, please come. Indian women were also laughing a lot and mocking very much the Westerners. Not only the Westerners humiliating, they were very cross because the British were humiliating their husbands and humiliating the people so much. And so they were, as they were too weak to really confront, they were taking their revenge by laughing at them. And I read you, one is going to read you something.
When the two Begums enter the Parikhana, the fairies have just begun to perform a play. Strange characters wearing crinoline or British officers' red uniforms hold forth on the stage. They're miming the occupiers to the laughter and applause of a few dozen women reclining on thick carpets strewn with velvet cushions. These natives really have no moral sense. They have innumerable wives and concubines, declares a fat lady wearing an apple green crinoline dress in a piercing voice. And the poor things put up with it, how undignified. What can you expect with their slave mentality if my husband ever dared to look elsewhere? A pink crinoline with a nasal tone says, "My dear, just imagine one of my servants had herself chosen a second wife for her husband. She said she was getting old and did not want to share his bed anymore, nor did she want to do the housework. The second wife would take care of it all, and on top of that, she would look after her with respect and gratitude." Really, these Muslims have no morals. The Hindus are no better. Muslims or Hindus, these people only laws are laziness and sensuality, intervenes a blue crinoline. Which Christian would dream of refusing to do her wifely duties even if she does not enjoy it? When my husband is in the mood and wants to, well, I pray. We all do, my dear. Only whores enjoy such disgusting things. In the Parikhana, the audience is in the fits of laughters. Jeers erupt from all sides. It takes a while before the actors can continue. A red uniform advances to the front of the stage. Whores or not, these Indians are lucky to have it home, and to have it home where we have to go looking for elsewhere with all the risk and expenses involved. Do you know, his neighbor retorts, that barely 30 years ago, before our young English girls started coming out to India to get married, and thus establishing the rules of decency, every officer had his bibi at home, his native mistress. Gentle, devoted, sensual, it was paradise. They both sigh, raising their eyes skywards. Maybe these poor Indians deserve to be pitied rather than blamed. There is a thin violet crinoline. Some adore gods with monkey or elephant heads. Others follow a false prophet and call a false prophet and call us polytheistic because we believe in the Holy Trinity. Fortunately, over the past few years, more and more of our missionaries have been coming out here. I've heard some Indians have begun to convert. Loud cries from the audience erupt her mid-sentence. These women, who had been roaring with laughter until then, now protest indignantly. What lies! These deceitful Angrez are spreading slanderous rumors to divide us. Who would possibly want to become one of these cannibals who boast of eating their God in a piece of bread? A God they crucified, a God who, calm down, ladies, a deep voice resounds. Instantly, the women fall silent and turn towards a gilded divan upon which their beloved master lies.
Okay, I think we have overdone the time, and well, I hope you read it and you like it.
Thank you so very much for that very enlightening talk. May I please invite Minister Press, Information and Culture, Mr. Sridharan from the Indian Embassy, to come and moderate the question answers for us.
Thank you, first of all, for this wonderful thing. Whoever teaches history, they all know that we don't teach history, history teaches us. And whenever I listen to talks about history, I always feel that we don't talk about history, history talks to us. And today history is talking to us through Ms. Mourad, and we are all very grateful for that. And she has kindly agreed to take a few questions. And there are two rules. One is one question per person, and second rule is only question, no comments. Thank you. Yeah, please.
My name is Zafar Iqbal. and I happen to be from Lucknow. So I have some idea what you are talking, and I think Amir-ud-Daula Public Library near Kaisar Bagh, which is near this Mahmudabad house,
And near Kotwara.
and press, Munshi Nawal Kishore Press, they have written books in, unfortunately they are Urdu language. They have covered a lot of material about Begum Hazrat Mahal.
I try to find, yes, there may be a book in Urdu. I try to find, usually it's very praising books, which I did not find very, objective facts. By the way, I must tell you something before you read the book. I took one liberty with history. Begum Hazrat Mahal had a military chief who was Jalal Singh. He was a very good-looking young man and very courageous. Her husband was in Calcutta having a gay time with other courtesans. And I felt, and I may be wrong, I may be right, nothing can, there is no proof. There cannot be any proof that there was a romance between these two. So I must say this is a liberty I took.
The gentleman in the middle, please. Yeah, you can take the mic,
My name is Ishtiaq Rasool. I'm also from Lucknow.
Oh my God.
20
good.
years I spent in Lucknow. Did my graduation in Lucknow University, and my best friend was a Hindu, Umarjit Jeet Rai.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 60 years ago. And then this problem started of 47, 48, 49, and people began to rush everywhere, rush out of India. And I came as a boat person to France, just like you. And so I lived in France for 5-10 years, did my PhD, and finally I was picked up by NASA, and I've been here for 45 years.
Oh,
So
okay.
could you focus on the question, please?
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
So I'm telling you, the question is, with so many good things you said, why there's so much the problem of disorientation?
Between. I tell you something, and it's good you ask me the question, because in fact, during what is very important, which I show, during the rebellion or the revolt, Hindus and Muslims were really fighting elbow to elbow. There was no problem whatsoever against the British. The British tried to corrupt. They sent money. I got the proof of that. They sent money, and the money was sent back to them. They could never corrupt anybody. The people stayed united. After that, after the British won, they understood that they had to divide. And I saw a letter, and it's very silly I did not keep it, but I saw a letter of a viceroy, British viceroy, after the rebellion, after the revolt, which tells the governor of different provinces to have the history book rewritten to show that the Hindus have always killed the Muslims, and the Muslims have always slaughtered the Hindus. So history has been, of course there was always some friction, obviously it was not heaven, but history has been rewritten also in a way to put people against each other. And it brought to what we know later.
Thank you. Raj?
Good evening. Thank you for a wonderful talk. I'm Rajesh Kadian, and I'm not from Lucknow.
And you're not?
He's not. He says he's not from Lucknow.
I'm not from Lucknow.
Okay.
I have, in fact, if I may take the liberty of asking two very small questions. One, the Begum is quite well known in
please
Nepal.
choose one.
Okay, I'll choose one.
No, and please talk a little slowly because
Okay.
I'm not so good at. Okay.
Well, the Begum is quite well known in Nepal.
In Nepal, oh yes.
And I wondered whether the Nepalese archives have quite a lot of material, because two things happened in 1858, or 1860 really. A large part of the Terai, which belonged to the state of Awadh, was given over
I know.
to Nepal.
By the British,
By
because
the
Nepal
British
was loyal.
For loyalty and support during the mutiny. And then the British, in fact, exiled her to Nepal. And there must have been quite a lot of communication and archival stuff. I wondered whether you had looked at that.
I've not been to Nepal. What I know that she has a tomb in Nepal, which is in a pitiful state. I've seen photos, totally dilapidated. It's near dustbin and all sort of things. Nothing, and we try to interest the Indian government to have something done. At the moment, nothing has been done. And you know, about that, which is interesting, in Lucknow, when I was there was still the park, Victoria Park, which is in the center of Lucknow, with a statue of Queen Victoria. I mean, I think the Indians are really open-minded, very tolerant. But then when there was a centenary of the Sipahi rebellion, this great-grandson of the Begum wrote to Nehru and said, one celebrates Rani of Jhansi, celebrates this and that, and not my great-grandmother who did so much. And Nehru came to Lucknow, and he renamed the park Hazrat Mahal Park, began Hazrat Mahal Park. The statue of Queen Victoria was taken out. I'm told it is in the zoo. Nobody knows. I'm told, I don't know, I've not seen it. And there was no statue of Hazrat Mahal because I don't know, no statue of her was there. But just a sort of memorial about her.
Mrs. Mourad, it's really a great work you presented because Awadh was a composite culture of Hindu, Muslim, and Yamuna Ganga culture. And the statue of still is in the zoo, Lucknow Zoo.
Do you know?
On the back side, they have.
Is it? It's still in the zoo.
So when Nehru visited that time, you were there?
Sorry?
When Nehru visited Lucknow after the independence, that time you were there?
No, I came to Lucknow the first time in 61.
I see.
61.
But it's really a great collection of reflection and real story which you presented in your book.
Thank you.
I belongs to Lucknow too. And last time I was there, so I went 3 families to know
Krishnaji,
about
focus
the
on the
old
question.
Lucknow.
Focus on the
and
question,
I got
please.
some of. So I have one question regarding the Begum Hazrat Mahal. You covered a lot of aspect of her work and her contribution in the mutiny war. What about the relation between the Awadh and the Bundelkhand? The Bundelkhand, Raja Bundelkhand.
As you said, there are many participants in the First War of Independence. So he's talking about that. Is there connection between them?
Raja of Khundel?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's like Jhansi Ki Rani before that. There was.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The question, the gentleman from the back.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, it's really great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't know how you're right. Maybe.
So one comment that we also have Aurangzeb rode in Delhi, and he was a
Yes.
brutal killer. So we are definitely an open-minded society, to have his road there. The question is that I'm a little bit confused at this moment. That what is the clarity the book wants to bring? Is this book championing towards a particular religion, particular caste
Of course
system?
not. I said from the very beginning.
Okay. So I just wanted
The
to...
contrary, I'm talking of the meeting of religion and tolerance of one to the other.
And how British kind of subdivided and the Indian and Muslims and kind of, brought like a divide and rule thing.
Yes, I talked about that, the divide and rule. They had to because Hindus and Muslims were fighting together against the occupier. So the British after that had to try to divide and did manage to divide.
Now a question. You mentioned that she had one son and they went to Nepal
Very good, I'm going to.
now, and that you met the descendants of Begum Hazrat Mahal. Presumably she had just one child. What is the lineage? How did they come back? Did they have a Jagis there?
No,
Were they landowners or poor?
No, I tell you,
All
in
that
fact,
descent.
it's very interesting, yes. In fact, she had this son, and she brought him in the idea that he should fight the British, etc. He was in Nepal. After a few years, after she died, the British allowed him to go back to Calcutta, where he had the rest of his family, because remember, I don't tell it, in fact, all the wives left with Wajid Ali Shah. Some stayed in Lucknow, others left. So when this young boy was crowned the king, in fact, there was an eldest son in Calcutta. So the family, so when the son of Hazrat Mahal came to Calcutta, I think there was quite a strife in the family. And the son, Birjis Kader, that the Hindu were calling our Krishna, Birjis Krishna, they were telling, he got poisoned. And one feels that he got poisoned, the complicity of the British and the family, maybe both together. And, but of course, he had children, and the one I met was his grandson.
One last question. We have time for one last question. Please, lady in the front.
I have a question about the original king. The a question about the king,
Yes.
who was her husband. Why do you think it is that since he showed no interest in coming back from Calcutta, he was having a good time there, the people of Awadh still supported him so much at a time when they were rebelling?
It's not that he showed no interest. He was a prisoner in Calcutta.
At the beginning, though?
No, from the very beginning. He was exiled to Calcutta. He was a prisoner, but he was a prisoner in a velvet cage, but he could not get out. And when the rebellion began in Lucknow, the British felt that he was responsible for it, and they put in Fort Williams in jail, in real jail, for 1 or 2 years, till the end of the war. And no, he could not. So the people, on the contrary, knew that he was kept. He may have had a good life because the British gave him, the money and the palace. But for 2 years first, he was in jail, real jail. And so he could not move. He was in a sort of house of arrest. There is a very good book which has just appeared now, I have not yet read it, by Rosie Levy-Jones. And she has written, it's a history, it's totally a biography, and no fiction at all in it. It's about the life of Wajid Ali Shah. It's the first serious book about him. And he was a very interesting person. He tried to reform, the state of Awadh. He tried to introduce good laws, etc. But the British did not want. They just didn't want. He could not do anything. The British resident was behind him and threatening him each time he was trying to do something to annex Awadh. So as he could not do anything, he got quite despaired, and he drowned himself in music and poetry and dance. You see?
We have come to the end of the program. I'm sure when I say this, I'm saying on behalf of all of you. There's an evening where we saw a rare combination of scholarship and creativity. And in that, what I personally appreciated is the lot of sensitivity and empathy with which you went through the whole process, and you yourself being, in a right way, a character of your earlier novel, right? And so her story itself is so interesting and so enriching. And she writing about another heroine who is having so many facets and so many layers. And the way, because she's a journalist, she connects everything to the contemporary scene, where this streak comes from, where it touches the contemporary world. So we all benefited so much from your talk. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in applauding her.
And Dharanji, may I request you to please give a bouquet of thanks to Ms. Mourad from all of us.